I have always wanted to do some kind of epic grand journeys. It took root when I was young and had a fairy tale mind. I started college and I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and somehow in the middle of that I was like, I want a job that I can afford horses, have the schedule to work with horses. I ended up going to nursing school and I graduated, and I started right in the middle of COVID. It was not the best time to be a brand new baby nurse. And so I struggled. There wasn't a lot of support. I didn't really know what I was doing, and there weren't a lot of people that could help you. So I was like, I need something to look forward to. And that's when I really started planning this trip.
There are healers on this planet with the power to soften the suffering of mankind, yet they have remained in the recesses of the world, abused, discarded, and labeled as trash. This is The Touch of a Mustang. I am your host, Shalise Clough, and I'm here to tell the story of wild horses, Mustangs, and the humans who are discovering and sharing their gifts while working to protect their well-being and preserve their spirit, so this divine power won't be lost. Join us on this quest with the Wild Mustang. Let's kind of start at the beginning. How did you get involved in horses? And then how did that go to Mustangs? And then tell us, and then we'll talk about what you're going to do and how that's all going.
Yeah. I feel like I kind of just came out obsessed with horses. Nobody in my family really owns horses. My parents both had
Really?
horses when they were kids. Yeah, but yeah, ever since I was old enough to probably make permanent object relations. I have pictures of when I was 2, just holding on to carriage horses and all the things. So I've always loved them, but I got my first horse when I was 8. My aunt actually gave him to me, and I had no idea what I was doing. Yeah. So I kind of just my aunt gave me an adult saddle, a 15-inch saddle, and all the things, and basically it was just okay, here you go. And I just figured out what I was doing, but not really. So I did a whole bunch of stupid things, and my parents were eventually okay, we should probably get some formal training lessons, whatever. So I started 4-H.
Okay.
And I think that was just kind of the downward spiral from there. I started training horses, and I worked for a dude ranch for 13 years, and then yeah, I didn't find the Mustangs until much more recently. September of 2022 is when I actually brought home my first 2 Mustangs. So, but yeah, anyway, so as soon as I got my first horse, I started dreaming about these, big trips, and I watched a documentary. I was homeschooled, so I watched a documentary of a couple that hiked the Pacific Crest Trail, and I was like, I'm going to do that on a horse someday. And honestly, that's kind of, I think, what planted the idea.
Yeah, so you've been
trip.
planning this for a long time.
Yes, yeah. Seriously, for the last 4 years, but I have always wanted to do some kind of epic grand journey. So, but yeah, anyway, so it kind of took root when I was young and had a, fairy tale mind, and then
Before we could be realistic and talk ourselves out of
right.
it.
Yeah, exactly. So I started college and I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I ended up taking a 9-month stint at a youth ranch in Oregon that actually worked with rescue horses, and it was a super cool idea. And somehow in the middle of that, I was like, I want a job that I can afford horses, have the schedule to work with horses. And I'd worked as a vet tech for 2 years. I didn't really like the small animal vet thing. And so I was like, well, human nursing, it's like a vet tech for humans, and it's a fairly easy degree is what I kept telling myself. And so when I got back from that internship, I ended up going to nursing school and I graduated, and I started right in the middle of COVID. Yeah, it was not the best time to be a brand new baby nurse. And so I kind of struggled. There wasn't a lot of support. There wasn't a lot of I didn't really know what I was doing, and there weren't a lot of people that could help you. And so I was like, I need something to look forward to. And that's when I really started planning this trip. I signed a 2-year contract at my first hospital, and I was like, at the end of this contract, I'm going to go on this trip. And I started kind of looking at different routes, and ultimately ended up with kind of an idea of the trail that I am now taking in 38 days.
Yeah, I've been seeing your countdown. I was like, wow, that's coming up soon.
It's so crazy to be talking about something for 4 years and then finally have it be this close.
Like on a countdown, yeah.
Yeah.
Better than Christmas, I bet. Tell us what exactly you are doing and what your plans are for it, how it's all going to work out, because it's pretty
pretty cool, pretty exciting.
Yeah. So I will be riding my horses from the border of Arizona and Mexico to the border of Montana and Canada. And then I just decided to tack on like an extra 250 miles to actually ride to my hometown. Just
Yeah.
because at that point, what's another 250
What's
miles?
250 more, right?
Yeah. So I'll be taking my four horses. Three of them are Mustangs. They're all five this
They're
year,
all
and then
5 years old. Wow.
they
That's
are
a
all
young
five. Yeah,
group.
they're all bunch of babies. And you can tell when you when you get them all in a line, you can tell there's still some baby brain to deal with. But
Yeah.
and then I have a quarter horse Appaloosa mare that I started, and she's 7, so she's kind of been my foundation of this whole thing.
She's gonna be the
Um,
leader out there, hopefully.
yeah, hopefully. And hopefully she's a good influence because it kind of depends
Yeah.
on the day with her.
Well,
But
a good mare can do really great, but
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so that's I drive to the border of Arizona on March 4th. I leave, and then the goal is to start March 9th, and it'll take about 7-ish months depending on kind of if everything goes according to plan and how many days off we take a week. And I'll be packing 2 of my horses. I'll be riding one, and then I'm calling them my spare tire. And so if anybody gets sore and just needs a break or a day off, I'll
hmm
have a horse that I can kind of trade out.
cool. And so are people going along with you, following you along the way, kind of helping or?
That was the initial intent. It kind of ended up being more of a solo trip than I had wanted initially. So I have sections. My dad's going to be kind of meeting me at my campsites every night for the first week. And then the guy who kind of taught me how to pack and his wife are going to be meeting me for the second week. And then after that, it's a lot of, like, I might be meeting somebody at the end of my week for a resupply, or I'll be riding through town and going to the feed store with my horses and picking up, like, I'm freeze drying all my food, so I'm sending it ahead. I can send it ahead to, like, post office boxes or whatever.
Wow.
So it's kind of takes a different form after the first, like, 2 or 3 weeks. It
hmm
becomes kind of every week's going to be a little bit different.
Yeah. How did you figure out the process you would use, like how you would get food, how the horses are getting food?
It was a lot of like just thinking through all the logistics. I was super lucky. I kind of just started. It was such a big task to try and figure out like who do I talk to, who's the authority on this, and like who can I even
Yeah.
talk to like find information.
hmm
And there's like a long riders guild that has kind of a group of people, and I tried contacting him a couple times. It just wasn't like it was hard to kind of get a hold of them and converse and actually like get some information.
Yeah.
Um, a bunch of people on Facebook just recommended that I talk to Gillian Larson, who has done she did a solo ride on the Continental Divide, and I think she's done the Pacific Crest Trail twice
hmm
by herself. And
Cool.
so I was like, okay, like I just messaged her on Facebook, and I was like, this is who I am and this is what I'm planning, and is there any way you can help me? And she was super, super kind, and like we ended up kind of setting aside a day. And so I got a lot of help from people. Trent Peterson is another one who's kind of done the same thing. I just tried to find as many like-minded and people who have done similar trips.
hmm
Mine is a bit maybe over ambitious in the fact that I don't most of the people that I've kind of talked to are like I either had a truck and trailer that like I would drive ahead and then like either hitchhike back to the horses or
hmm
however that works, or I would have somebody meet me like every week or every day or whatever, and they would kind of have like a crew.
hmm
And so mine might be a little bit more isolated, I guess, than a lot of the people that I've talked to, which was not an intentional thing. It just was the logistics of like I couldn't find anybody to kind of meet me. So the longer that I've planned it, the more I've just messaged people like I'll just email the town hall in this certain area, or like can I stay at your rodeo grounds or whatever.
hmm
And people have really come out of the woodworks and have I've kind of been finding communities here and there, and finding people that are super, super sweet and like, we would love to have you. We'd love to host you. I know this person here and this person here. And so it's kind of started to form a network, which is really nice because it was a big task ahead of time to like
Yeah, that's
just,
a lot.
Yeah, yeah. It definitely, I used all 4 years that I started talking about this to plan. And then on top of that, I also adopted the three Mustangs as
Yeah.
two-year-olds
You're like, it's not
and
enough for
started
me
them.
to just go
Right?
on a solo trip across the United States. I'm going to do it
Yeah.
on some newly trained Mustangs.
Yes. Yeah.
So, talk a little bit about that. What drew you to the Mustangs, and then what has that process been like? That in itself is a long process.
Yes, holy cow. I had no idea first off. I had only known
That's
one
probably
person who
good.
had a Mustang. Yeah, right? I think ignorance was bliss for me for a lot of this
Oh,
trip. I
yeah.
just jumped in. I was like, "Ah, it'll be fine. What's the
Yeah.
worst that can happen?"
Yeah. Sometimes that's the only way to do it because if you know,
Oh
you're
yeah.
like, yeah, no, that's too wild.
Yeah, for sure. I think looking back, I was like, I don't know if I would recommend this to anyone, but it's been good for me. So,
Yeah.
so I'd only ever known one person with a Mustang, like all throughout my childhood and growing up. It's, lots of quarter horses here. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of the horse of the West, right?
Yeah. Well, and what part of the country are you in? Where are you coming from to?
I'm in Idaho,
Okay.
which it was not like overly horse country, I don't think anyway. At
Yeah.
least the area that I'm in. I mean, there are tons of people with horses, but it's not like what you think of like rodeo and
Right.
so anyway,
Okay. Not many Mustangs.
not many Mustangs, no, that I had come across anyway. The longer
Mm-hmm.
that I've had them, the more I'm starting to see them.
Yeah.
So I was looking for horses, and horses. This was during COVID, were like 20,000 to like 200,000. So a large part of it was just cost. I was like, I need horses that I can do this with.
Yeah.
Couldn't really afford, like, I was looking at mules, but I mean, at that time and even now, like if you get a nice mule, they're quite expensive, and I think they're well worth their money. But I had heard a lot about Mustangs and how like if you can't get a mule, a Mustang is the next best thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, I mean, I just logged on to the BLM website at the Wild Horse and Burro, uh, and I just started scrolling, and there were like 500 horses, and I was like, holy cow, how does this even work?
Yeah.
There are just horses online.
So many.
Yeah, and so I created an account, and I started adding horses to like my watch list. I was like, how do these things work? So
Just exploring the whole process. Yeah.
I discovered online auctions, and I was like, well, this is a fascinating topic.
Yeah.
And I started kind of adding horses, and I was like, how do you choose a horse when you just look at them online? I mean, they have videos, so you can kind of watch the way they move, and you can get, I think, a good feel of their personality just by like watching them kind of interact. And
Mm-hmm.
there's somebody with a flag that kind of moves them around the pen, and so
Yeah.
I think you can get a good sense, and like watching their eyes, I think
See how
the
they're
eye of a horse tells you a
responding.
lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so I started adding all these horses to my list, and then I was, I don't know, bored one day, or maybe it was just wishful, hopeful thinking. I decided to apply, like, for one of these auctions that was gonna go live, and I was like, well, I'll just put in like an application for two horses, just
Yeah.
'cause.
See how it goes.
On one of my night shifts that I was working at the hospital, I decided to add two of these horses to my list, and I had not clicked the add button, I clicked the bid button. And so I ended up bidding on these two horses, two 2-year-old Mustangs,
Uh-huh.
and I was like, somebody's gonna outbid me. This is like,
Yeah.
they'd been on my like, I was kind of looking at them. I liked the way one of them moved a lot, and then the other one just like, her eye was really, really sweet, and she's pretty brown mare,
Mm-hmm.
and nobody outbid me. And
Yeah.
so this auction,
There's a lot
ended,
of
and
horses to bid on. Yeah.
there are a lot of horses to bid on, and these two were out of Nevada, which I've kind of found the longer that I've followed. Not as many horses are kind of desirable, I would say, from Nevada. They tend to be smaller, and they tend to be a little bit less, like, bulky, and kind of, I think less people tend to go for those horses. So anyway, I ended up buying these horses, and I won the auction, and I was like, well, shoot, I have to pick them up in 2 weeks. And so that kind of honestly just started the spiral for me of like,
I
I
mean, it
had to
sounds
get
a little bit
6 foot
like
panels.
fate. Yeah.
I think it was. And I also think there was, who fills out an application for two horses without having some kind of like ulterior motive, right? So
Right,
I
yeah.
think I was probably hoping for it a little bit, but yeah, I'll go with the fate thing.
Yeah.
It was a very kind of shocking experience. And then, yeah, I drove to Nevada. So it was, I think, 800 miles one way to go pick up these. So I had to rent a truck because I
Wow.
didn't have a truck with a hauling capacity for that long. And anyway, it was just a whole thing. And then I ended up getting these two-year-old Mustangs that I was like, okay, these are my two. And my mare that I have that I had already started, and it's like, okay, then we're doing this. Like, this is it. And I started training them. And I don't know what I was expecting. I think I was like expecting horses jumping over corral panels and like wild and,
Yeah.
just
I mean, one of
chaotic.
mine did try to do that, so it does happen.
There you go, yeah. And I think that is why, you have to have the certain height panels and all the
Hmm.
things. That was not my two that I got. They were the most docile, like sweet, quiet horses. Friendly is what I ended up naming one of them. He's my little bay out of the Jackson Mountain HMA, and then Gracie, which I just chose a random name.
I love
She's
it.
my mare out of Triple B. So yeah, that was kind of how the whole process started, and I didn't know anything about packing. I didn't know how to pack a horse, and so it was a very rapid, like I had to learn everything all at once. I'd never
Yeah,
started a
that's a lot.
Mustang. Yeah, and I'd never packed, and so yeah, there were a lot of things all at once that kind of happened. And then by June of the next year, so I had two 3-year-olds at that point, I had decided that I needed probably 4 horses to do this trip because I was going to probably do it by myself and not have somebody that could, refresh horses if somebody goes lame. And so then I bid on another one, and
You're
I
like, this
got
was
York.
easy. It was great.
Yeah, so easy. Definitely no input involved.
Right.
um, so I got York, and he was out of Sheep's Head Heath in Oregon. And he was also in Nevada, so I had to drive down to get him as well, which was a whole nother thing. Like I had my own truck at that point. It ended up breaking, and I was like
Yeah.
stranded at a gas station. It was a whole adventure in and of itself.
Was that after you picked up the horse that you were stranded?
No, it was before. So I was
Okay.
supposed to pick him up the next day, and
Hmm.
and I had my fuel, like the line that fed the fuel diesel into the engine, cracked. And so I
Hmm.
was like literally just dumping diesel fuel all over the highway, and I like
Jeez.
managed to pull into the gas station just as I like ran out of fuel, and then I was stranded there for like 8 hours, and then I had to pick my horse up the next day. So anyway, it was quite the stressful experience.
Yeah.
But it worked out, and I picked him up, and then we drove home, and it was perfect. It was meant to be once again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I love this. This is all pretty crazy. I don't know if you know
yeah.
how
I
crazy it is.
I do think, again, I tend to jump into things, and like I
Yeah.
just tell myself it'll be fine, and usually ends up working out, but
Yeah.
I make things a lot harder on myself than they really need to be. So, but I don't know. There's an element of adventure and fun in that, right? You just have
Yeah,
to
for sure.
see where it goes.
Yeah. Have you had any doubts along this process when you're,
Oh my
picking
gosh.
up these untrained? And when you've had these doubts, like what keeps you headed in this direction that you're like, this is crazy. My truck just ran out of gas because it's broken, but I'm still going to do it.
I think it's sheer like stubbornness. Just when I tell myself that I'm committing to something, I'm like, there is no other option now. I am committed. Like, I also think, again, like, I like doing hard things. I like doing kind of obviously a little bit crazy things, and I
Yeah.
always have. I kind of jump into things and like, how hard can it actually be? And then I have to really prove it to myself that it was quite hard. But then
Yeah.
on the other end of it, you're like, well, shoot, I did that. Like, what else can we do? So I think there is just like a sheer like willpower and like stubbornness. I also have been very much surrounded by people who have been nothing but encouraging and supporting. So like, I remember the first time I told my parents, they were like, yeah, okay. Like, they just kind of took it and were like, I guess if she says she's gonna ride her horses 3,000 miles, then she probably will.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time my dad told like a friend on the phone or something. He's like, yeah, she's planning this trip. And they're like, that's literally insane. And he's like, no, I think she can do it. Like, it was just, I have amazing
Yeah,
parents, and
some awesome support.
I have some awesome support, yeah. And the people that have helped me train my Mustangs. I had started a few horses before I started my Mustangs, but not like, I mean, that's a completely whole nother thing. Like, starting a horse that's handled and halter broken, like, you know.
Yeah, you're starting from a different place for sure.
Absolutely. And I had a lot of like preconceived notions about horse training going into it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like consider myself like a camp follower of like one trainer or another, but I definitely did learn a certain way, and I think the Mustangs definitely taught me like not every horse can be approached with the same like intent and the same intensity, and I think that the Mustangs definitely taught me to approach things with a little bit of a softer, like, this is definitely a partnership. This is not something that I can force you into. This isn't something like, it has to be mutual. And I think a lot of like domestic raised horses, you can kind of bully into a lot of things, and the Mustangs have definitely taught me a different approach, and each one has been slightly different, which has been really cool and very humbling to kind of train. And I by no means claim to be like a horse trainer or an expert, but it's been really cool to kind of discover like how each horse has kind of taught me something a little bit different.
Yeah, talk more about that, about just the training process, how that started, how it went, how the different horses responded differently, kind of their different personalities. Talk all about that.
Yeah, so first of all, I couldn't really get a hold of them because, you know, they're like, "Meh, I have no
Yeah,
incentive."
they don't want to be around you.
They don't want to be around you. Friendly
Okay.
was obviously the most friendly. He was like,
Mm-hmm.
he'd stand across the round pen from me and he'd just bob his head up and down. I don't really know what that was meaning to him. I don't know if he was being playful or, you know, whatever. I think it can mean a lot of different things with horses. He was the most willing to just kind of approach, and he was very curious and very friendly. And I would say he's probably been the easiest to start. Because he's just a very easygoing guy. Like, he's like, "Meh, okay, I suppose. Like, if we really think that this is something worth doing, then we can probably try it." And packing, I made a lot of mistakes with that aspect of it because I'd never trained a horse to pack, and I didn't know how to pack. And so
Yeah,
there were a
usually
lot of
both of
things,
you.
right, which is probably not the best combo, but they were very gracious with me, and we made quite a few mistakes together. But I think that was one thing too, that like, he's probably been the most forgiving about everything. Like,
Mm-hmm.
he's just like, okay, like, we'll try this again. I didn't like it last time, but we'll give it another go. Gracie is probably the most, I would say, the wildest of the three of them. And I think it might just be a little bit of a mare thing, but and I also think she's probably I think she's just going to be a slower mature than the geldings, but
Yeah.
she's very wary. Like, you ride her across like a wood boardwalk or whatever, and she snorts. She puts her nose to the ground and she snorts as you walk over the whole thing. And then you step back down on the dirt, and she puts her nose down to the ground and she snorts, and she lets you know this is a new surface that we're entering, and I just want everybody to know. And she does that like everywhere we go. She just kind of announces to the world, this is something new that I haven't done. But she's also a very willing candidate to where she doesn't stress about things. Like, she's very
Mm-hmm.
wary and she's very cautious in her approach, but she's very willing to try, which I think is very nice.
Yeah.
And York has probably been the most, he's not resistant, but I had to switch around a lot of my training methods with him because there's nothing that you can force him to do. Like, I laid the other two horses down because that was a method that I was familiar with and kind of had good reactions in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked well with both of them. And I tried it with York, and that's one of the things that I wish that I hadn't done with him.
Mm.
Because he's one of those horses, he's very big, he has a lot of draft and like cavalry horse influence, and I think a lot of those like Oregon Mustangs tend to be a little bit draftier. So for one, I can't force him really to do anything because he's so
Yeah.
just beefy. And then it's also his personality goes right along with that, in that like there's no forcefulness that you can use with him. It is all an ask and a response. And I hadn't trained a horse like that before, and that's kind of where I've backtracked with the other 3 horses that I have, where I've kind of learned and kind of come to realize that that is a really important, and I really value that now, where you kind of have a little bit more of a communication between the two rather than a tell and a go. It's an
Yeah.
ask and a give. So yeah, York has been one that is very much kind of taught me a little bit of, I think, of a softer approach. And he is like, he's my best pack horse. He's has a little bit of reactiveness. Like he has like a slow build on like internal tension, and then like just one thing will kind of send him over the edge. And he's only bucked me off once, which I feel like is pretty good.
Yeah.
uh,
Less
but
than me.
that is, yeah, that is kind of his reaction. Is you can feel him just kind of slowly building and getting more and more like just tight. And then
Yeah.
just like one little thing will kind of kick him over the edge. And so when you ride him, that's kind of, if you just point and shoot down the trail, he's like, yeah, I got this. Like we're just going on a walk. And then when, like, I've dabbled in arena stuff with him, and he's a little bit more, I think he'll just be a really slow kind of ask and give process. But anyway, but yeah, he is definitely my best pack horse, and he claims all the other horses as his. He is my herd boss,
Nice.
so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. And so by the time you head out on the trail, how long will they have been under saddle? And then after you get them under saddle, when do you start like with the really packing and
Yeah,
training for that?
I actually started with the packing first
Mm-hmm.
because, again, like, there's a lot of aspects that you have on a pack saddle that you don't have to deal with a riding saddle.
Mm-hmm.
I do now ride with a britchin, but at the time I didn't. And that's obviously an uncomfortable kind of irritating thing for a horse to have to get used to. Something going under your tail and behind your butt, and it pulls when you go downhill, and so there's that whole aspect. And then anything with noise, right? So I have bear boxes that I pack, and those are very loud and kind of uncomfortable, and you have to learn that you're, possibly another horse width, because you have about half a horse on either side, that you have your pack saddles, your pack bags. And so there's that whole aspect of, like, they have to learn that they're wider. They have to learn that when they bump into something, it's not like a scary, painful thing. It's just, you just have to learn that you're wider, and you have to kind of bend your rib cage a little bit more around trees. And so I started training all of that before I even got on them. I did a lot of groundwork first just to get them, used to human things, because I think that is where the Mustangs tend to be, my Mustangs anyway.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
Nature is not scary at all. Birds
Yeah.
popping up, turkeys, all the things, like, they're like, we know this.
Yeah.
It's like tarps and flags and plastic bags and like all the human stuff, right? So all of that I spent a lot of groundwork just kind of getting used to. And then I moved on to packing and kind of just carrying around like empty pack panniers, and teaching them to walk in a string was probably the most difficult thing,
And
because
this is still you're still doing this just on the ground with them?
yeah, this was all on the ground before I got on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And the string I didn't work on so much. That was more just leading behind my riding horse, of getting used to me being
Okay.
above.
Yeah.
And then once they accepted the pack saddle, and they kind of got used to carrying like just stuff, not necessarily like heavy or metal or anything that was like really a big hurdle. It was just kind of like soft canvas panniers. Then I started kind of tying them together and working on leading in a string. And that was very difficult, because inclination is you want to walk as a group, a bundle. It's
Yeah.
hard to get them to walk nose to tail, especially if you're not on a little narrow trail.
Yeah.
Babies, and so like they bite each other's back legs, and then they kick at each other, and like, so they just have that like baby energy of walking around and just playing with each other. Um, and then you have the inexperienced packer, and that, I think, was also another huge factor of, like, I just put them in a lot of scenarios that in hindsight, was way too much of a step all at once. And so they were very gracious with it, and they
Yeah. And
kind
it's
of
such a
worked with me.
process learning that until you've been
Yeah,
in it. Like
right.
I would imagine it's become a lot more natural, but when you first start, it's a whole new different
Yeah.
world.
Oh, yeah. And there's so many different, like, I didn't know that there were different styles of packing, and there's different methods, there's different hitches, there's just so many little infinite things that you can do different. There's different breakaways that you can use, and there is a fact of you need a breakaway, and if you tie horses together, you don't want to hard tie them, and I was hard tying them initially because I didn't know any better. And then it's hard to find packers that are young. Like, it's hard to find kind of people that are my age that know how to pack, because it's not a skill I think that a ton of people do anymore.
Yeah.
Unless
No,
you're
I
like
wouldn't think
working
so.
for unless you're working for like an outfitter or a Forest Service or national park or something. And so finding people was also difficult to teach me how. And then on top of that, finding people willing to teach me how and take a young green packer in with 3 young green horses.
Right. Yeah.
And so,
Was a
thankfully,
lot of that virtual, or did you go and meet with people?
I just started, I have some really good friends in my area, and they've been packing for basically their whole lives. The husband kind of got me started on like the equipment and what I would need, and we started kind of looking together, and he kind of got the down and dirty on like equipment. And then the wife was sending me like all of these, like, there's a pack clinic this weekend in this place, and there's, this is the Backcountry Horseman, which has been a huge resource for me. Not all Backcountry Horseman clubs have a packing aspect of it, but she sent me a flyer of a Backcountry Horseman club that had a pack clinic it was just like a 1-day pack clinic in Plains, Montana, which is like about 150 miles away. And so I was like, okay, I guess this is the one. And I drove there, and that's actually where I found the guy who ended up teaching me kind of most of my packing skills that I have. And then I also did a pack clinic in Twist, Washington with Trent Peterson, who had also ridden his horses on the Pacific Crest Trail. So he had kind of that rare aspect of he's been packing for like 30 years. And then he also had the long riding experience. And so he was also a huge resource to kind of meld those two aspects together, because a lot of packers just go out for like a weekend or maybe 2 weeks tops, and it's hard to find packers who have done it for a very long period of time. But yeah, I found mostly in person, and then I either would haul one or all 3 of my horses to go kind of just get as much experience as we could. So we packed in, our first packing experience was packing up water cubies for a lookout in Montana. So basically hikers rent the lookout, and we were packing up the water to supply the hikers, up at the lookout, because there was a spring like 1.5 miles or 2 miles away. And then like maintenance on that same lookout, and we would pack up like paint and boards and for a new sign and cement and all the things. And then we packed in like a bunch of logging for Forest Service, like bridges, basically anything that I could get anywhere near.
Yeah, you're
packing.
like, I need something.
Yeah,
somewhere
exactly.
That's inaccessible.
Yes, hunting, anything. Like, I'll pack out your animal. I'll bring boards somewhere. Like, just getting as much experience as we could. And really, that was our process. Is we got the down and dirty of how to pack, and then we just spent a lot of time either just doing it, yeah, in 1 or 2. I would usually ride, Susie Q is my Appaloosa quarter horse mare, so I usually would ride her, and I'd pack 1 of the 3 or 2 of the 3 Mustangs. And it wasn't until last spring that I started tying everybody together. And leading a pack string of 3 is probably super easy for some. It's very stressful for me. It's getting to the point where it's
sounds easy to me.
No. I mean, you see the people that have like mule strings of like 20 or something, but
yeah.
For me, 3 is probably my max, at least for a while, because you have, I don't remember who said it, but it's like trying to harmonize with an echo. So you have your horse, and you're trying to regulate your horse's speed. You have the horse behind you, which you can directly affect, right? You're leading them.
Yeah.
You have the horse behind them, which is affected by your leading of the horse in front of them.
Second.
And then you have,
third.
right? And then you have your horse in the back, who is entirely, like, it's the tertiary, right? So
Are you
whatever
just
you
praying
do.
for that one?
Yeah, basically. Yeah, just praying that they walk in a straight line, they don't pull back, and that they just
Stay
kind
with
of get
us.
the general, right,
Yeah,
get
it's
the
a
general
lot.
gist. It is a lot. And so that was a lot of work. We literally would just walk around our field in circles, just trying to get down the fact that there were 3 of us, 4 of us technically, and when we stop, we all stop. When we go, we all go. And we've kind of come up with a little system, like I'd say, all right, walk, and everybody kind of hears the cue and off we go, and then whoa is kind of an easy one for everybody. And usually the horse in the back is like snacking the whole time. Gracie just walks with her mouth open and will periodically close it and grab
like,
whatever
this is
she can
great.
find.
The humans
Yeah.
are leaving me alone.
Yeah, she's like, this is the spot. She likes being in the very back. That's her favorite position.
Yeah.
And then we finally did a trip in the Bob Marshall in September of last year, and that was kind of like my no or go no trip. No go or no go. There we go. And
Test it out. Is this really gonna work?
basically, yeah. Yeah, so I brought everything that I was going to bring on my trip, and we were like, okay, if we can make it 5 days, maybe we can make it for 7 months. And so that was
it's close. It's basically the same
close
thing.
enough. Basically.
One more day at a time.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and that trip went really, really well, and I was very much blown away by how much 3 horses can learn really in 2 summers. So it was a true testament, I think, to how amazing those horses are and how much I think we've all learned together. So it's kind of a cool spot to be in. I don't recommend it for anyone because it's everybody's
follow
learning.
your example.
Right. But for me, it's been super cool, and I think my appreciation for those horses is really.
And this whole time you've been working full time?
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah. So
How did you find that balance? Like, okay, here you got to take care of your financial needs or whatever, but also working on this project that's super time consuming.
Yeah, it was very much winters are for working and summers are for like minimum working. So as much time as I could get off, I would. And that's, again, the beauty of my job is that I can, I'll do a lot of like 12-hour shifts in a row, and then you have 8 days off. And so just naturally built in right there, you can do like a 3-day trip or a 4-day trip. And you can get a lot done in that like schedule. And then, like I said, like I took last summer, I took basically like 3 extra days each month off. And we would spend like 8 or 9 or 10 days in a row just trying to get everybody lined out and get some good practice trips in. And then once again, nursing is one of those careers where it pays well enough that I could kind of keep my nest egg for my trip as well as buying, because I didn't have any of the supplies. I'd never packed before.
Yeah, it's got to have some expenses related to it, not to mention you're not going to be working for 7 months.
Right, yeah. So, and this winter has really, like, I haven't ridden my horses since December, which kills me because I usually, like, all winter I'll ride. But this winter has been very much about, like, I need to get, financially, everybody needs to be set so that we can take 7 months off. And then, when I get back in the fall, again, nursing is a great career where you can kind of just say, okay, I need to look for a job, and there's probably going to be one somewhere. So, but yeah, it has been a balancing act. And I don't want to say that it took some of the fun out of riding, because I mean, that's how I recharge. That's basically my life outside of work. But it was definitely a second job. Like
at the same time, it's like, if I'm going to do this, you have to go out there whether you feel like it or not today.
Exactly. Yeah. It was that mindset of like, I really don't want to do this today, and I am tired and everybody's grumpy, but we're going to go at least walk around the property like 2 or 3 times, make sure that we're good, and then we're going to like practice loading and unloading, or, like just little things here and there. And that took a lot of, I think, discipline for me, because it was really easy to go like, we'll do it tomorrow.
It takes a lot of discipline. I do that all the time. I'll do it tomorrow when the weather's nicer.
Absolutely. And I think this winter has been it's been kind of a nice break for everybody. The horses have just been able to be horses and eat and play and do all their things. Yeah. And I've been able to just kind of focus on like feeling like we're at least somewhat stable going into this big trip of like, we will be okay financially if something happens, or, all the unexpecteds that can happen from quitting your job for 7 months.
Yeah. One more crazy thing that you're doing.
Right.
No, it's awesome. And so on your trip, what is the path you're going to be taking? Is it trails through wilderness? Is it side of the road? What will that look like?
It'll be a little bit of everything. I was wanting to do as much wilderness as possible. I think that's where both myself and the Mustangs tend to thrive. We all love it out there.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a really cool thing to be able to bring your horse into an area that they likely saw growing up. And I think they appreciate it just as much as you do, which again
Yeah.
is something that I think is a pretty cool thing about Mustangs is, um, like, I mean, I've ridden a lot of trail horses, but there is definitely a difference when you get them out there. Like they were born and bred for it. So I do. I love exploring the backcountry with the Mustangs. I also am bringing my dog with me, so there was a part of like and just highway safety with horses,
Mm-hmm.
especially
Yeah,
having
for
three of
sure.
them in a string.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to stay away from, as much traffic as possible. But I think the main thing is just like my heart is in the backcountry, and that's really where I'd like to spend most of my time. And so we did. We tried to find, and then camping is another logistic. Unless you have best friends like every 8 to 20 miles,
Yeah.
you have
Right.
to camp somewhere. And so I think we're blessed to have a lot of the western United States is public land, and so you can camp on BLM land, you can camp on National Forest Service. Now there's designated camping areas in national parks that you can camp at, and so I think also part of that and just appreciating all the wild spaces that we have that we can
Yeah.
stay at. So there were a lot of different aspects. I don't know if any of it was like an intentional like I'm not trying to be the first to do anything. I'm not the first
I
woman
mean,
to
I
do
feel
it
like you
alone.
are. I don't know if anybody's trained 3 Mustangs and then taken off, but that's
Maybe,
not the
maybe.
intention here. Yeah.
That's not the intention. Yeah, I'm not trying to do anything groundbreaking. It's just I guess what speaks to me, and so
Yeah.
it's just what I feel like I've been called to do.
Yeah. Is the trail system pretty good going up there? Are there lots of trails that connect? There isn't a single one that goes the whole way, is there?
No, so there's the Continental Divide that goes through New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, and Montana. The Colorado aspect is like 15,000 feet. So you're up on a lot of ridges and kind of at risk with storms, and there's
Yeah.
probably going to be snow when I'm going through. And then New Mexico is a lot of obviously desert. And so I didn't really want to go through Colorado and New Mexico. So I moved 2 states over, or 1 state over technically. So I chose Arizona, and the Arizona Trail is a fairly well-established trail system that goes from south to north or north to south.
Hmm.
And they have, like, a lot of people do through hikes of it. A lot of people bike. They have like a biking route that you can do. It's pretty well documented. And then I have like 3 different mapping apps. So one of the mapping apps that I use, it has like comments that people can leave, like there was good water here, you're crossing this gate. Like, so there was just a lot of public feedback, which I found helpful because it was a really
Mm-hmm.
daunting task to say, where can I ride my horses? So the Arizona Trail was one. And then there's a trail system that's not very well connected. It's not like, I think the goal is to one day have it be a trail system, but it's the Great Western Trail through Utah.
Okay.
And so you have sections of it that are all connected, and then there's a decent amount of sections that you kind of just have to look at like maps and backcountry trails and say like, okay, this will get me from point A to point B.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are like cattle trails, some of them are old logging trails, some of them are just backcountry roads that I'll be riding on. And then once I get into Wyoming, I do some highway riding from northern Utah through southern Idaho into Wyoming. And then I'm just riding up basically a mountain range that have a bunch of interconnecting trails. And it's hard going into this because I've never been to any of these states. I've never been to Arizona, Utah, or Wyoming.
Wow.
I have no idea what the trails will be like. And
Mm-hmm.
so to a certain extent, I'm relying on like local knowledge. And then I'm also just kind of praying as I go in, like, hopefully this is a good trail that I picked. I'm looking at
Yeah.
satellite imagery and kind of like seeing, is it heavily wooded? Should there be trees down? Is there a lot of
Yeah.
water? Doing the best that I can, but there's a lot of just kind of, if I get there and it's not passable or, something's not going to work, I just have to be willing to be flexible and kind of have a couple reroutes in mind. So then I ride through Jackson, Wyoming, through the Grand Teton National Park for just
Mm.
one day into that kind of mountain range just to the west, and then hopefully, if I can get my backcountry permits through Yellowstone, and then I'll ride the Continental Divide after that all the way up through Glacier, again, if I can get my permits. So
Mm-hmm.
and then those
Is
extra 200 miles.
to get the backcountry permits, is that pretty difficult? Is it a long process, or how does that work?
It is more complicated than I thought. It's not the most complicated that it could be. I had no idea. I've never really desired, like I've never had the ambition to ride in a national park before, and so
Yeah.
I didn't really have any idea how it works. And again, Gillian Larson was a super huge help with that because she has spent a lot of time in national parks. And so she kind of showed me, the resources that I needed to figure it out. And then it was just a lot of trial and error. So Saguaro National Park was my first national park that I was going through. And so I kind of had an easy trial. It's not a heavily like trafficked park
Yeah.
for horses and backcountry permits. And
Right.
most of the time what you have to do is there's like a open enrollment access period where you apply for your backcountry permit, and that's usually like 4 to 6 months in advance of when you want to be there.
Yeah.
And then you either get your backcountry permit or you do not. So it's a lottery system, and I'm unclear if it's first come first serve or if they literally just draw a bunch of, random numbers.
Surprise.
Haven't figured
Yeah.
that part out yet, but it does seem to be the sooner you are, the more likely you are to get it. Yeah, so the backcountry permit, if you get your backcountry permit, then you have a certain date and time that you can apply for your specific campsites.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, through Yellowstone and Glacier, you have to have, like, this is my first choice of campsite to campsite, this is my second, this is my third, and you just have to be willing to, like, I might go 6 miles today, or I might go 25. And you just have to be
Mm-hmm.
willing to say, like, these would be great. This is my first choice. And if I don't get this, then I would still, you still have to have kind
Yeah.
of a route in mind. So like I said, I haven't actually, the enrollment period for Yellowstone is coming up. It's right before I leave. And then I actually have to apply for my backcountry permit in Glacier in the middle of like my second week. So
Mm.
I'm hoping that I have service and that I can do that. And then my
Yeah.
parents have graciously said that they would be willing to do it for me if I am in the backcountry
Yeah.
and not anywhere where there's service. So yeah, it's been a whole process trying to figure out how to learn just the logistics of camping
Yeah,
and
so much planning.
yeah,
Even the things you don't think about. Can you
right,
cross the country, and where do you
right,
cross to that? Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Talk about a little bit about like safety. What kinds of things you're going on this trip all by yourself? What are some things that you thought of that you're kind of putting in place just to make sure it's a good, safe experience for
yeah,
everybody being out there alone in the
yeah,
wilderness?
yes. So I carry a Garmin, and I actually have it's a GPS unit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have basically three separate methods of navigation that I use. If I'm in a local area that's small enough, I'll have like a compass and a hard copy map. I couldn't do that for this trip because there were so many map sections that I would have needed.
Right.
It was just way too much for me to even like wrap my brain around.
Yeah.
So I ended up using 2 or 3 different apps on my phone, so like different. So I use Onyx, I use Gaia, and then I also have Far Out, which it only has like specific trail systems, but it's still useful for like if you want to use a part of this trail system, you can purchase that section of maps. And then I have my GPS that I'll be bringing with me. So obviously you have your tracker on your phone that you can be using to make sure you're on your pre-planned track. And then I also have my GPS that is the Garmin that has the satellite texting. So it has an SOS feature if something were to go wrong. And then I also you can send like 30-minute updates or 4-hour updates, whichever one, anywhere in between, to my parents or really whoever I choose. And they can
Mm-hmm.
basically watch me plot, like your pins will kind of drop as you go, which my dad is very, very religious about following. And
He's
if
on
I'm
top
like
of it.
stopped,
Good.
yeah, if
Yeah.
I'm stopped for more
I'm
than like
glad.
30 minutes, he's like, what's going on? Like, why are you stopped? I'm like, I just have to readjust my packs. Like, we're fine.
Yeah.
But that was one thing that we practiced quite a bit before, obviously, this trip, just making sure that, like, I had safety redundancies and all that in effect. I also bring a firearm because if you have an injury in the backcountry with your horse, that's not something that really anybody wants to think about. There are certain scenarios where it is
Yeah.
kinder to
A potential reality. Yeah.
a potential reality that I think you kind of need to be prepared for when you're riding that far in the backcountry, that if your horse like were to break a leg or something horrible.
Mm-hmm.
it's far kinder and more merciful to put them down than to let them suffer.
Right.
So I bring a firearm, and then I also have bear spray, just because, maybe if the horses and all the other noise doesn't keep them away, just in case. Have to have
Yeah.
my third safety measure. But yeah, that's safety-wise, that's pretty much all that we have. And the biggest thing is just letting people know where I'm going to be at. And I'm not going to be away for more than I think the longest stretch between human contact that I have is 18 days, which is quite the stretch.
Yeah, it's
But
not nothing.
hypothetically,
Yeah.
most of the time it's 5 to 7 days that I'll go, and then I'll
Yeah.
have somebody that I'm checking in with at the end of that stretch where I'm doing a resupply of food and grain for the horses, and we're taking a couple days off. So there are a lot of kind of just safety checks built in of I didn't make it to my check-in, somebody come look for me.
Right. Yeah. How is that going to be changing from, living modern life, more or less, to very rural, no, well, not no, but very few of our
Yeah.
modern comforts and all of that? How do you anticipate that being?
I'm genuinely excited. I have multiple times in my life, I think I just want to get rid of all technology and just go live a nomad life.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of excited that I'll get a little bit of a chance. It's like you said,
Yeah.
it's clearly not what you could do. I don't think I would ever really want to do that unless it were, in a group of people or, there were some other
Yeah.
safety mechanism built in. But I'm so excited to just kind of unplug from the pace of what we do nowadays. It will be so different. It'll be kind of the same. You still have, stress. You still have a goal every day. You still have a job essentially to do. But literally all we're going to be concerned about is, do we have food? Do we have water? And how many miles do we have to go today? And there's just such a beauty in the simplicity of that I am so excited for. I don't
Yeah.
love being by myself, so there will definitely be full-blown one-sided conversations between myself and all of my
Yeah.
separate animals, but
You have 3 horses to talk to.
oh, yeah, there will be
Yeah.
plenty of conversations had.
Well, it's all very exciting. Are you going to be able to post updates and things as you're on this? Can people follow you and tell us all about that and how people can connect and I guess enjoy your journey without all the hard work and stress?
Right. No, that'll be probably, I think it'll be more fun to watch from the third person perspective.
I don't know. I think you're going to have some amazing experiences.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna try and post. I have an Instagram page that I've kind of documented all of my prep on. So really from the time that I got my first 2 Mustangs all the way up until now, I've been kind of posting and documenting all of the prep that's gone into this trip, which I think was more for myself than anybody else, because just having it documented somewhere is a
Yeah,
really cool thing.
but also so good for, like you say, the next girl that decides they're
Right,
going to take off into the wilderness for
right.
7 months. Yeah.
They can scroll through my 600 videos of meaningless stuff, but so I'm gonna try and post once a week. If more, that'd be great. I don't know quite how much service I'll have. I'm gonna anticipate it's probably gonna get less the further north I get, but the goal is to kind of do an update, around the time that I'm doing a resupply. So I should have,
Mm-hmm.
more likely a more populated area that'll have service. And I hope when I get back, I'd like to maybe start a YouTube channel, just so that you can have those longer format videos than you can on
Yeah, you
Instagram.
definitely should.
Yeah, because I think it would be I think again, more so for myself, but also to share it with other people, because this is very much something that I would love to pass on to the next
Yeah.
generation.
Well, and I think, like you said, not many people are, packers your age are not super common. So how cool to have that for other people to see, you did this and this was the
Yeah,
process and
yeah,
all of
for
that.
sure. So, but yeah, my Instagram is on a wild Mustang with a bunch of underscores underneath each
Okay.
one. So
So that's the main
that is
place to
the main
see
place,
updates.
yeah. I have Facebook, but I log in maybe once a month, and so people will leave messages, and then I'm 6 weeks later, so sorry, I just saw this, this
Yeah.
is the answer to this question. So yeah,
Yeah.
Instagram is kind of the main way that I've been documenting so far.
Awesome. One thing we didn't talk about that you kind of mentioned is if someone's going to take on a Mustang, what are some of the things that you, having fairly new to it, having done it, you didn't just do one, you went all in, got
I
3.
did. Yeah.
what's some advice or things that you learned about that process and just being able to take them in and be good stewards for them?
Yeah, for sure. I think like honestly from now on I could see myself just owning Mustangs. I love the breed. It's exciting because you never really know what you're gonna get 100%. You kind of have an idea.
Yeah, you
E-
don't at all.
yeah, each herd is so different and
Yeah. And the internet adoptions, I think they're the wildest card. But even
yeah,
if you go and see one in person, they're still, what can you see in like 5, 10, 3
right.
hours?
Right, yeah. So I think the biggest thing is understanding. To me, I did not take the responsibility of adopting a Mustang lightly. I don't tend to buy horses that I plan to get rid of anyway. I'm
Yeah,
kind of one of those. I'm like, I put all this time. I'm kind of attached to you now. Like, you're
I'm the
probably
same.
going to die here. Like, I have a
Yeah.
very hard time letting go of horses. I haven't successfully done it yet. So
Yeah. That's not a
I'm
bad
very
thing.
much no, I'm very much one that to commit to the animals that I bring into my life. But I see a lot of horses, a lot of Mustangs that people will adopt and they don't quite know, the responsibility or even like the skills that you have to be able to even just handle them. And so you'll see Mustangs on like Craigslist or whatever. And I think those are the horses that are at risk of getting sold into like slaughter pipelines and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff of like, it's a 5-year-old horse when you adopted it, which is already kind of on the older side for a lot of people, and then you hang on to them for 2 years and you just never quite get them halter broke, and so then you have kind of a feral horse that's been sitting around now they're 7 years old, and I think the biggest thing for me is just that when people kind of get into the Mustang life is finding either somebody who's done it or somebody who's like an accomplished horse person if you're not that yourself, just so you can kind of do it responsibly and set that horse up for success because they're such cool horses. It's really sad to see them just kind of get
Yeah.
cast aside and or just kind of forgotten.
Yeah. And I think, unfortunately, because they are so easy to acquire, you
Yeah,
just get on the internet and click a button
right.
that you don't always know what you're getting into. And I think, I certainly found that. It sounds like you found that too, even though you were with horses. Like there are a lot of things you still have to learn and you have to kind
hmm
of be a little more open-minded and willing to learn in that process.
Yeah, no, for sure. There were a lot of similarities to starting, I would say, like a domestic horse, but there were also things that I think you have to be teachable. You have to be willing to let that horse kind of teach you
Yeah.
what they need from you and just be willing to adapt to each horse and yeah, just be open-minded, I think is the biggest thing when you start a relationship with a Mustang is you have to realize that it's not quite the same relationship that you have with a horse that maybe you raised or bottle fed or whatever. There's definitely a partnership and you kind of have to have that mutual respect. Then I don't know if you always have that with domestic horses.
And you said probably here on out, maybe not. Who knows? You love Mustangs. What are
I
some of the things that have kind of drawn you into the Mustang world and to owning them, to having them part of your life?
Yeah. I've always been like an underdog, kind of like I'm rooting for the one that nobody's rooting for. My first horse was a quarter horse Arabian, and he was not pretty by any means. He was short, stocky, little, like my farrier called him Seabiscuit. He had these huge knees, like, and he was like the best gaming horse that I've ever ridden, and he just did it himself. I mean, I was 8, so I just kind of sat there and like
Yeah.
told him to go
You were
faster.
along for the ride.
Right, exactly. But really, he kind of kicked me off of like everybody that I knew in 4-H was like their parents were buying them $14,000 horses. They were sending them to the trainer.
Wow.
You know, it was like, can I buy my way into this? And I think for me, it was about like, can I get the least likely candidate and then earn my way
Uh-huh.
into it?
Yeah.
And
And
with
in
the
a lot of ways,
Mustangs,
the least desirable in a lot of
yeah,
circles.
absolutely. Yeah, they're feral wild horses, and a lot of people say they're not actually wild horses, they're feral horses. They're generations of released horses.
Yeah.
Some of them are back to Spanish ancestry and some of them are just ranch horses. But yeah, they are very undesirable to a lot of people. They're just vermin to some people. And so I think for me that kind of like, can I take this horse that nobody wants and turn it into something that like is this amazing animal that somehow walked 3,000 miles across the country and like didn't struggle at all because that's what they were born and bred to do. And so yeah, so I think for me, I could totally see myself maybe someday, I don't know, I'll want this fancy bred quarter horse that I don't know, something. For now, I'm for sure, like, I'm already scoping out my next Mustang, and
Are you?
I'm not ready for one by any means. I have three
Yeah.
5-year-olds,
But
but
I mean,
I'm
you got to start your ideas back there so that
absolutely,
by
yeah,
the time they materialize, you have all the craziness that you need to
for
make some
sure,
more.
for sure. Yeah, you
Yeah.
just have to start plotting it now, so maybe in like 2 or 3 years we can
Yeah.
find one that fits. But yeah, I love the Mustangs, and I think it's that unpredictability that you have, and then it's just that you're rooting for the underdog, and you can create a really, really good horse, and they're
Yeah.
so versatile too.
Yeah. And I think you being out there alone with Mustangs, they're going to be watching out for you.
For
It's
sure.
definitely something I felt from my horse, and it's a cool feeling to be out there
Yeah.
in the wilderness. So
Yeah.
I'm excited for you. I'm excited to be
Yeah.
watching. I definitely don't have your level of bravery, but what an incredible adventure. Just really cool for you to be doing this and to have this thing in your mind and you're going for it. And it has not been without struggles. And I'm sure there will still be challenges along the way, but I'm really excited to see how it all plays out. And
Yeah.
maybe when you get back, you'll come back on and tell us some of the stories and adventures that you have.
Yeah. That'd be awesome. I'm sure we will have plenty.
Yeah, it's gonna be really exciting, I think. It'll be really cool. And really, there is just something being out in the mountains with a horse. So for you to be doing that for, so long, it's gonna be cool.
Hmm.
Much for coming on and taking the time to do this. And
Yeah.
we'll definitely include all the information for anybody who wants to follow along and see what you're doing. And super cool what you're doing with the Mustangs and that you're just going for it. I think it's awesome.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's kind of a fun. This is my second podcast that I've ever done, and it's a new world for me too. We're just
Oh,
branching out into
yeah.
all sorts of different things. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
there's
thank
all
you so
kinds of
much.
things ahead of you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us and learning about horses that heal and the humans who help them. We hope you'll continue with us on this journey. We'd love for you to subscribe on your favorite platform and follow The Touch of a Mustang on any of the major social media outlets. Please share with your friends, anyone who loves horses, or anyone who might be struggling and could benefit from this message. If you have felt the healing power of horses or help them in their divinely appointed mission, please reach out. We want to hear your story. As we say goodbye, always remember that the horse is always there to help you heal.